always love the Tokeativity events. I feel like Tokeativity has been such a great way to connect with people. So it's always nice to be here, and I'm excited to be the keynote speaker here today. So Sam introduced me. I'm Liv. I wear a lot of hats. I'm an event planner, an educator, and a chef. And I would say when I make content, probably the number one question I get is, how do I get your job? So a lot of people are very curious about it. And I have to say that what I do is very unique to my experience. My career started in experiential dining. I've been a chef and a restaurateur for over 20 years. And about 7 years ago, when I heard that cannabis was being legalized in Oregon, I kind of dropped everything and started working in the medical industry. And then that turned into the recreational industry that we now know and love. But when I was working in the cannabis space as a bud tender, I did notice that there was a learning curve. We were all learning together. That means people who worked in the industry as well as consumers. And working as a bud tender really showed me how quickly the laws change, how quickly product can change, and what is the customer experience like, which I think really gave me a great grasp on what customers are looking for and what we can provide as people who make edibles or who are consulting and coaching in this space. So the short answer to all of that is I made my job up. But if you have something that you're passionate about in a different realm that you want to bring over to the cannabis space, there's usually a lot of allowances where you can do that. If I give you any advice, it would be to just really pay attention to the laws that are in place and be considerate of your guest, because the guests are really what we do all this for. So in 2014, like I mentioned, I stepped away from being a chef. I moved into this cannabis space, and I went all in for lack of a better term, I went all in because I just wanted to learn as much as I can. And I kind of treated it like a college experience. I reached out to doctors. I was in a dispensary that was surrounded by hospitals. So I reached out to doctors, and we had doctors who came in who I would talk to, and they would mention, oh, I have a patient who needs help with XYZ or wants to experiment with cannabis, and can I send them to you? That for me was a very different experience, because then I get to see medically what helps people. It's not just about getting stoned. It's not just about having an edible. It's considering the entire person and what they need and how they're going to absorb it and how they're going to digest it. And everyone is so different. So it really showed me that not all edibles are the same, and not all edible consumers are the same. What's exciting about being in this time in 2021 is I think that having a virus that affects the lungs and breathing has kind of pushed people more towards edibles. And I think just being at home more and not wanting, kind of wanting to be discreet. I think edibles do lean into being able to be discreet, which is great. But when I first was starting to make edibles and host events, even though I was in the cannabis industry, there was still stigma around edibles specifically. People who smoked all day would just be like, edibles? I don't mess with those. So I really wanted to know why. I wanted to get to the crux of what makes a bad brownie experience, what makes a bad edibles experience. And really, it all boils down to absorption, digestion, and the guest themselves. So I try to really be mindful of all of those things when I'm putting on events, because everyone is so different. Everyone's digestion is different, and everyone's trauma is different. So they might be absorbing things in just a different way. But after a few years of working in the industry, I was nominated Bud Tender of the Year in Oregon. And at the time, Oregon had more dispensaries than McDonald's and Starbucks combined, which is a lot of bud tenders to be nominated out of to be the best. So that was really eye-opening for me. I was really excited about that, but it was also like, oh, we don't have a lot of people who are educating. They're really just focusing more on sales, which I wanted to focus more on education. And in my experience, that experience came to a close because I was experiencing harassment and different issues with my disability not being accommodated. And I actually took that business to court and successfully sued them, which made me realize that there are unethical people in this industry who profit off of people with disabilities. And it's important to be mindful of people with disabilities in an industry that profits off of people with disabilities. So I always wanted to be able to accommodate all kinds of people and make my events accessible. That's why the virtual learning has been so great, because even before COVID, I was doing infusion kits with ethical brands and platforms and trying to curate products out of a sea of a million products. What brands are making a product where they care about from seed to sale what is happening with their product. And unfortunately, it's not everybody. There are a lot of people out there who make products that are tainted or mislabeled or don't have the cannabinoids in it they are advertising they have. Those kinds of issues are kind of running rampant because this industry is not as regulated. So I think as consumers and people who consumers speak to, like me, I know there are other coaches and chefs out there. I think it is important to understand that there are ethics that we need to pay attention to when we're recommending these products. And that became a pretty big mission of mine, to make sure that I was looking at the ethics and passing on a great product. As a chef, I look at where I'm sourcing my food from, what farms I'm looking to source food. So why wouldn't I be looking at the farms that are growing the cannabis that's going in my food the same way? I want to know that they are ethical, that they are clean, that they are taking measures to test for things like heavy metals, that they're using water that's clear and clean. You know, those kinds of things that we would look for when we're looking to wine, when we're looking to food, when we're looking to other products. We really need to let that carry on into where we're sourcing cannabis from and how we're sourcing our cannabis. And if I was to give any advice to people who want to come into this space and put on events or start an edibles business, there are a couple of things that I would like to go back in time and tell past me. And one of them is know the law. The laws change really quickly around cannabis on a legal regulated market. Here in Oregon, we didn't have edibles from the start of recreation. So I think we had to wait 6 or 7 months until edibles were offered on a recreational level. And from the night before they were offered to the day of being able to offer edibles, the law changed 3 times. So if I had checked just once on my Oregon.gov site, then I probably would have gone with a law that was out of date by the time I went into my next shift. So it's important to look to the laws just to know how you can move, how you can operate. And if you look at my events, they're all in very unique spaces. I've had events in greenhouses and on rooftop gardens. And that is because technically the only spaces that you can consume cannabis are in a residence. So I was kind of like, I feel like kind of like a vampire, because I go to people and I'm like, can I come into your house and throw an infusion party? But I've found some amazing, beautiful, and unique spaces that I've been able to transform into a restaurant for the day, to make a beautiful experience for my guests. And I consider the guest all the way through. What is the guest experience like? What are they going to taste, hear, smell? All of those things really go into the experience. And that comes from my previous career experience, because my whole career started in experiential dining, which is an experience for the diner. The diner is seeing, tasting, smelling, and learning. So I really put a lot of love, effort, and work into all of that hopefully comes through. And we do work in this gray area because the laws are changing so often. And I want to kind of move in a way that I can legally because it's all gray area. So I keep my events in private residences, and they're all different. They all move around and they all have different guests and different appeals. But ultimately, they all are in a residence, and I make sure that everyone feels taken care of and safe. And make sure that you're thinking about consumption, because we aren't, as a chef, I'm not just giving someone food, I'm giving them food that can intoxicate them. So I think it's important too to make sure that you have safe measures in place, that you are really thinking about the guest safety. And again, looking at my events, I don't host events that are over 25 people because people are going to be intoxicated. People have had in the past adverse reactions to edibles. So I make sure that everything is microdosed, but I also make sure that the guest list is microdosed. It's a smaller guest list, less than 25 people, just so I can make sure to look people in the eye, check and make sure they have a safe ride home, just check in on them, because I do think that that is an important element of this type of event, is making sure the guest is cared for. And because my events are educational, I really noticed that a lot of people bring their grandmother, their aunt, their dad, older generations of their family to show them that this is something that's been normalized. You can learn about it in a beautiful space. And I personally feel like a lot of people get cannabis-induced anxiety because they don't know what's going to happen to them once they eat that edible. So having someone educate them, and someone who is knowledgeable right there holding your hand, I think that that does help to quell any cannabis-induced anxiety that might come on. I also make sure to pad CBD into everything. So if I am giving THC, I like to add in some CBD because it does help with cannabis-induced anxiety as well. I personally am also adding in layers of terpenes and other phytocannabinoids to just give a full experience in different layers. So it is the best edibles experience possible, because I want to erase that bad brownie experience. I wrote my ebook about the bad brownie experience, and I want people to be able to avoid that best way possible. So another thing that I think we need to look for is, again, considering the guest and making sure that everything we do is accessible. I had an event called CBD Summer Camp where I took a group of people to one of my favorite hemp and cannabis farms in Southern Oregon. I set it up so that they could camp out or stay in a cabin. So people were safely able to sleep over if they were intoxicated, still relax and not have to worry about getting home or driving or anything like that. And then at that event, I worked with a forager who foraged food from the land that we were on. So not only were you getting to taste this amazing hemp and cannabis, you were also tasting the food and water that grew around that hemp and cannabis. So you get a full expression of what that area had to offer, in its cannabis, but also in its food and its water, everything. And I think that for people like myself who are tactile learners, you get to see, touch, taste, and experience that land. It gives you a different connection to your source of flower, where we're sourcing that hemp from. You're going to see that farm name and already have a connection, know that they are testing everything and making sure that it's clean and clear for you to move forward and infuse other things. And also, I just want to make sure that everyone is staying safe. Like, again, we are serving people who are intoxicated, and make sure that you have things that are accessible. I sometimes work with interpreters for the hard of hearing and deaf. I make sure that most of my events are accessible via elevator, have ramps, things like that. And if not, I do have virtual events as an option for people who are at home or disabled and can't make it to my events. So I hope going forward that this is something that is normalized as well. So more people are offering accessibility, safety, kindness, and knowledge so that we can all have amazing edibles experiences going forward.